Without any further ado from me, welcome back, and I turn it over to our moderator, Doug.
Thanks, sir. Okay, buddy. Well, what a great honor and distinct pleasure it is to be able to participate as an AUSA moderator on a panel of such distinguished gentlemen and Ken Hunsaker. Retrograde and Reset, multiplying our Army's fighting capabilities through responsive material management. What a great thought, especially considering what General Dunwoody talked about this morning in the recovery of capability out of Iraq and Afghanistan, resetting that capability to provide for the Army of the future and to be able to do it under restrained budgets and changing budgets. First, let me introduce the panel chair, Lieutenant General Dennis Vai. Currently serves as the Deputy Commanding General, United States Army Materiel Command, and has most recently held the title of Commander, Reset Task Force, Camp Arif John, Kuwait, where he was placed forward in a theater to undertake the tremendous challenge of synchronizing the retrograde and follow-on reset of a massive amount of equipment returning to U.S. soil. It is always true. Leadership does make a difference, and that's what I believe has allowed the accomplishments that General Dunwoody spoke this morning. He has tremendous joint experience, serving in multiple positions up through and including being the Joint Staff J6, and hands-on logistics management experience as the commander of CECOM LCEMC, where he executed the critical wartime mission while also executing the largest BRAC move of our current force. Next, General Kevin Leonard currently serves as Commanding General, Military Service Deployment and Distribution Center at Fort Scott, Illinois, where he is the commander of an AMC organization responsible for deployment and distribution, as well as being the Army component to TRANSCOM, responsible for not only movement of equipment to and from theater, but personnel and even household goods. Prioritization and synchronization of critical assets, both transport assets and personnel, are his daily business. He's also one of those rare commanders with 2 4-star bosses, with both bosses of different services. Now that's an individual who understands balance and how to build teams. He's a truly experienced commander. Operational experience includes CG of the 1st Sustainment Command, in theater and at Bragg, and he clearly has the background and focus to ensure mission success. He's, in my view, clearly one of those who gets it, and it's a great honor to know him. The next is Mr. Jim Dwyer, currently serving as the Deputy Chief of Staff for Logistics, G4, Headquarters United States Army Materiel Command. A critical role as decisions are made to determine what and where and how to maximize every dollar. Mr. Dwyer's prior experience as the Acting Director for the United States Army TACOM Integrated Logistics Support Center, along with once commanding the Red River Army Depot, give him a special understanding of both mission in respect to time and budget requirements. He also has had operational experience as both a Division G4 and a support battalion commander, and brings something else special, critical commercial experience, being the Vice President for Land Systems for Vision Technology Systems after hanging up his uniform and prior returning to government service as a government civilian and a member of a senior executive service. Next, Mr. Glenn Raymer, Vice President, Combat and Sensing Systems for Raytheon Network Centric Systems. Prior to assuming his current role, he was Director of Integrated Land Combat Systems and has previously held positions as Director of Advanced Systems, Production Manager for Advanced Technologies and Components, and Director of Radar and Ocean Surveillance Products within the Defense Group of Texas Instruments. He has both a technical background, receiving his bachelor's degrees in electrical engineering from the University of Arkansas, an SEC school, and a master's degree in EE from Southern Methodist University, as well as practical management experience in developing programs that support critical soldier needs in increasing situational awareness, reducing combat weight, and improving force protection. The next individual on the panel, Mr. John Urias, retired from the Army as a Major General with over 31 years of distinguished service, with his last active duty position being the Commanding General of a Joint Contracting Command in support of Operation Iraqi Freedom and Operation Enduring Freedom. After retiring from the Army, he continued to serve soldiers in the Army as the Vice President for programs for Raytheon Integrated Defense Systems, and today, where he is the Executive Vice President of Oshkosh Corporation and the President of Oshkosh Defense, leading all aspects of the Oshkosh Global Defense segment, including tactical wheeled vehicle programs, new product development, lifecycle sustainment, and aftermarket services, all critical to our force. And last but not least, Mr. Ken Hunsaker, retired from the Army as a Lieutenant General with over 35 years of distinguished service, commanding at every level up through and including Corps, and tremendous joint experience as the DCG, U.S. Forces Iraq, and as the Vice Director for Force Structure, Resources, and Assessments, J8. He is currently Executive Vice President of Excellus Incorporated and President of ITT Excellus Mission Systems, where he is responsible for system solutions for C3 requirements, range, space lift, and surveillance, as well as full logistics support and technical services for facilities and equipment at over 285 operating locations in 20 states, 20 foreign countries, and 5 continents. And talking to Ken, I think he's visited them all in the last 6 months. He is a critical mission supporter for our Army's mission in Kuwait, and as I talked about, Ken still leads from the front. Each one of the panelists, and I'll turn it over to the panel chair. They'll give a short presentation, and then we'll transition to questions. As mentioned earlier, fill out the cards. We'll provide the questions, and then the panel will answer the questions. General Vice, sir.
Doug, thank you very much for that very kind introduction. And to the senior Army leadership, to the Association of the United States Army, General Sullivan, sir, General Dunwoody, other distinguished guests, members from other armies that are present today, on behalf of this very distinguished panel, I'm certainly honored to serve as the chair today. This morning, you heard General Dunwoody speak very passionately about being bold, adaptive, and innovative as we move and build our force of the Army 2020 as part of the Joint Force and continue to provide the decisive edge. I think there's no greater demonstration of the Army Materiel Command's embrace and commitment to General Dunwoody's vision than today's panel, where we leverage Retrograde and Reset through responsive material management to reconstitute our Army, generate combat power, and build strategic depth. I think Secretary McHugh's statement on the slide accurately captures the significant accomplishments of our Army at the end of operations in Iraq. I think it's important to frame, if we go to the next slide, please, to frame for the discussion today, to reflect back just for a moment of where we were in Iraq in 2009. After the U.S.-Iraqi bilateral security agreement requiring all forces to redeploy from Iraqi territory by 31 December 2011, in May, this was the footprint, 236,000 personnel, military, civilian, and contractors, 341 facilities, 40,000 rolling stock, and 83,000 containers that were arrayed in a country the size of the state of California. AMC at that time was facing its own challenges, sustaining 2 wars on 2 fronts, in Iraq and Afghanistan, preparing to support and planning for the surge of forces into Afghanistan, all the equipment, material requirements to support those forces, and then also leading at the same time the largest and most complex base realignment and closure in our Army's history that shifted our 4 centers of gravity for the command to Redstone Arsenal, Aberdeen Proving Ground, Rock Island Arsenal, and Warren, Michigan. It required the relocation of our headquarters after a nearly half-century presence in the National Capital Region to Redstone Arsenal. Impacted over 11,000 personnel within the command, and with 97% of the command being civilian, for many, their first move, relocation probably since college. Enormous undertaking at the same time in supporting the mission, multiple command posts, and of course arriving in Alabama being greeted by about 160 tornadoes during that week. I'll always remember that week, ma'am. I think our senior Army leadership at the time certainly recognized that the status quo would not work in terms of seeing the enormity of the retrograde mission that was faced, and reflecting on not having the Iron Mountains that we all recall of Desert Shield and Desert Storm that took years to retrograde. And so at that time, in accordance with what General Dunwoody often says, in a complex situation, fix the C2 first, the command and control first. And that's in fact what our Army did. In providing and working with CENTCOM and providing the mission, giving the mission to the CG of U.S. Army Central Command as a supported commander for redeployment of Army forces and materiel, and the task to Commanding General AMC as a responsible agent for executing headquarters DA retrograde policy in the theater. Go to the next slide, please. To accomplish this mission, General Dunwoody deployed out of Hyde for the first time an AMC command post, a responsible reset task force led by the Deputy Commanding General, to position it forward, to provide AMC forward presence as a responsible agent, to responsibly draw down the force, and to complement theater efforts. The concept of operation was to link the industrial base to the operational force and was focused on 4 imperatives: visibility, quickly being able to see and understand the magnitude of the equipment and material that was located in the theater, to bring that equipment to accountability so we knew in fact what actions needed to be taken in terms of retrograde, reset, or redistribution, to work policies and procedures with the Department of the Army, with CENTCOM, and within AMC to increase velocity, and then of course to triage forward, to repair and return equipment to the fight and be able to meet those requirements. And so in essence, connecting the FOB, the forward operating base, to the depots, and facilitating responsible drawdown while leveraging national and joint logistics and building strategic depth for Army. And while the R2TF certainly was a key enabler in bringing a unique blend of strategic, operational, and functional expertise across the entire logistics enterprise, this mission would not have been possible without the relationships that were developed and invested in with our strategic materiel stakeholders. The headquarters Department of the Army staff, CENTCOM, DLA, TRANSCOM, ASALT, RCENT, and especially industry. And it enabled these successes, resulted, as you see on the right, little known fact that over 50% of the equipment for the surge into Afghanistan came from Iraq because we had these procedures and processes in place. We introduced the Theater Provided Equipment Planner, a logistics disposition process that allowed us to reduce the days for disposition instructions from 18 to 5. Working with our redistribution property assistance teams as they received equipment from the units to reduce that processing time from 27 to 11 days. And of course, at the end, to be able to redistribute materiel, ammunition, and other equipment that was required to support the Afghan mission, as well as retrograde back to CONUS. On the 19th of December, when General Austin happened to pass through the theater, he sent a cryptic note, and he said, "I'm in Arifjan, it's looking for the Iron Mountain, and it's not here." And it's because of those strategic stakeholders that I talked about, and investment in relationships and the processes that were put in place that enabled us to be able to move that equipment and meet the retrograde goals and objectives. Of course, the next challenge ahead is Afghanistan. Certainly has its own unique challenges that we'll discuss here with the panel. A landlocked area responsibility, no capture submit as we called it in Kuwait, and being able to move equipment south and sort it out at that point in time. However, AMC is already leaning forward with over 50,000 personnel, military, Department of the Army civilians, and contractors on the ground today, sustaining the fight while simultaneously supporting retrograde operations. And through the employment of our subordinate commands, our life cycle management commands, working with our strategic stakeholders and our partners, we're able to deliver these capabilities today while maintaining focus on supporting the warfighter. And keeping focus also on those 4 imperatives that we had from our lessons learned in Iraq, and being able to maintain visibility, accountability, velocity, and triage forward. I now transition to Surface Deployment Distribution Command, Major General Kevin Leonard. And Kevin would often call and say, if you book it, we'll ship it. And we held him to his word and continue to hold it today. Kevin, over to you.
Thanks, sir. If you book it, we will come. That's a pretty good motto. Because General Sullivan is here, I have to mention, at the end of Desert Storm, as we brought the Big Red One home, it took us a year to get back to a level of C2 readiness to fight. We don't have a year anymore. And so as we contemplate the future, some of the things that I'm going to throw up on the slide will be seemingly self-evident, but bear repeating and really have to become a part of our DNA again as they once were. SDDC, we answer the fundamental question, where's my stuff? Whether it's your household goods or an MRAP or an MRE, where's my stuff? It's central to everything we're doing, and it's incredibly important as we reposture, redeploy, reset the United States Army. If I can go to my first slide, please. So the first thing, there's an old saying in data management, garbage in, garbage out. So I say here, accurate data and documentation is critical, key to successful movement. Said differently, we have to know what we have, we have to know where it's at, and if I could just coach everybody, start early. So we alluded to that, that process of early identification, starting with our presidential orders that said, you're going home from Iraq. We have a construct in place right now for enduring freedom. We'll talk a little bit about that on my next slide, but know what you have, know where it's at, start early, and if you need help, call SDDC or the rest of the enterprise, and we will be there. So as much as if you book it, we will come. We'll come before you book it and help you do that data management so that we can get it right. Accurate projection of requirements. It's all about anticipation. Most of our units, when they fell in on FOBs, ended up with a lot more equipment. That's not a logistics description, but a fair amount of, much more equipment than they had anticipated, whether we called it theater-provided equipment or material that had accumulated on a forward operating base over time. When it came time to redeploy and come home, somebody had to figure out how much stuff do we really have. And as we went through this process with the Responsible Reset Task Force, most folks found that there was a whole lot more on the FOB than they had originally considered. Which gets to my third point, and something that I live with every day. Global container management through FOB conclusion. Most of our FOBs, our forward operating bases these days, most of the material moving to and from those bases is moved in a box, whether it's a 20-foot box or a 40-foot box. So for us, for logisticians in particular, where is that box, where's my stuff, is incredibly important. And frankly, at different times in the war, we've done this well, and then not so well. I think we're now in a place where we're doing it far better, and believe me, I get a lot of help on trying to get even more better as we go forward. So if you think about that container as a part of gain and maintain situational awareness, much like we do in the maneuver world, I think that's a really important concept. For enduring freedom, the DCG referred to a couple of things. So we're at day 89, as I sit here today, of the Pakistan line of communication being closed. As General Dunwoody referred to earlier, there isn't a soldier who's done without a ration, water, fuel, ammunition continues to be delivered. We continue to maintain the status and tempo of combat operations. I'll talk a little bit more about that on the next slide of how we're doing that. I'll drop down to keys to success for the Log Nation, if you will, all of us. No secret here. We've got to be able to anticipate. We've got to be able to respond. But constructs like the Responsible Reset Task Force, how it networked all of those logistics entities and others in Southwest Asia, they provide continuity. Continuity that didn't exist in our structure prior to that advent. So my argument would be we have to continue to keep that kind of capability in place. It might not be the same size, but something that responds and is looking at how we come home in an orderly process. If you will, how do we achieve the strategic velocity necessary to reset the United States Army in the shortest amount of time possible? That would be one construct. There's some expectation management. Let's go to the next slide. So as we're operating in Afghanistan, my friends in US 4A are constantly saying, Afghanistan is not Iraq. Absolutely right. And we all get that. We talked a little bit about Kuwait. We had Kuwait, Jordan, Qasr, lines of communication that were robust. They weren't necessarily easy to transit, but they were trafficable. That doesn't exist in Afghanistan. As most of you know, we're subject to the vagaries of weather, poor infrastructure, and then we already talked about the closure of the Pakistan line of communication. I would be remiss if I didn't say a little bit about the money involved in that. When we lost that line of communication, we began to incur increased costs. And I'm not going to throw big numbers out, I'll just simply say this, that when we lost that lock, the rough order of magnitude of cost incurred by moving equipment in a different way, multimodal and use of the Northern Distribution Network, is about 4 to 5 times more than what it cost us to operate in going through Pakistan. And that's just the dollar figure. That doesn't talk about the time cost for delivery or redeployment. So there are some really significant things we're going to have to consider going forward. Finishing up on the left-hand side of the page, DCG talked about that a little bit. It really was the synchronization and coordination of all those things and looking at where the limiting factors might be. Wash racks, for example. 200 plus wash racks in Kuwait. We don't have that in Afghanistan. A little bit, if I can go back over to the right-hand side, enduring freedom. The Northern Distribution, that NDN, immature. We are in the process right now of running proofs of principle to use the Northern Distribution Network, which was our outlet valve for when we lost Pakistan line of communication, to redeploy equipment. The first 3 proofs of principle are going, and we'll see how it goes. But as you might imagine, those are longer lines of communication transiting multiple countries with multiple requirements for customs clearance, et cetera, et cetera. And it gets a lot harder, and I think it will be more expensive at the end of it all. Finally, I'll move down here. Route constraints and limitation, I talked a little bit about that. It's not as easy when you contemplate coming home from Afghanistan to say, well, just put a 40-footer on a train, it'll make it through the Salong Tunnel, no problem. We really have to do the math, if you will, the engineering, the feasibility analysis that suggests, can we traffic those lanes? And so far, so good. And in fact, STDC has the Transportation Engineering Agency that helps it do that. So as I close and I'll pass the mic here to Jim, it seems to me that we have to sustain this effort and in some ways modify what we've done with the Responsible Reset Task Force, deployable command posts from Army Materiel Command to help us work the next mission, which is this redeployment and return of forces from Afghanistan. We have to achieve that strategic velocity, and we will do that. And as far as SDDC is concerned, we will continue to deliver that trust that has sustained our forces in combat. And speaking of delivering trust, I'll turn to my old battle buddy, Jim Dwyer, who will talk to you about how we're going to reset some materials.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that. It is an honor to be here and to follow a transporter. I haven't said that very often, but it is an honor.
I used to call me a quartermaster.
Well, you're a transporter now. Given the huge problems our transporters had to get us the equipment back from theater, and as you heard General Leonard say that Afghanistan is not a walk in the park, It is our job now to build combat power, and we do that very well in AMC, have done it extremely well since the war started, and we're going to continue to do that until OEF draws down and we bring that equipment back. Next slide, please. These are our tools, organic industrial tools that we in AMC use to generate combat power. And what we want you to notice is now the DOLs are on that slide. That's a huge step forward for us, and to follow up with what the CG said this morning, we are globally linked with those sources of repair. We can see inside the depots, of course, with LMP. We can now see inside the DOLs through LIW, the Logistics Information Warehouse, and as the CG mentioned, the Secretary of the Army designated the LIW as the logistics, authoritative logistics repository for data. So because of that, we can now get data and see ourselves in the DOLs and in our maintenance facilities and our arsenals and depots to generate combat power, and that's what we're here to do. And that's a good thing, and we're only getting better at it. LIW is getting better. LMP, we're learning how to ride that very well in AMC, and it has enabled us to see ourselves much better than we've ever had in the past. Next slide, please. In generating combat power, we've got to have a common operating picture that is real-time information. We have developed within AMC a common operating picture that looks at the readiness. Right now, it's the EOH, the equipment on hand readiness of all of the units in the Army. We can go from the BCT down to the MP dog team to see what they have on hand. So this is an updated 24-hour. This is updated all of the time from our friends in logs at LIW. And the sources on the map on the top left are, again, the tools that we have in AMC, our industrial tools, to include the DOLs. The graph at the bottom left is a depiction of the 73 BCTs that we have in the Army, and we can array that to show any unit in the Army, but we're tracking the BCTs as they go through their ARFID and aim points in terms of where they are with equipment on hand. And the graph at the top, the bar graph at the top right, shows us for one particular unit what they're short. That's real-time data. It's a huge benefit for us because we can see that at AMC, the brigade can see it because LIW and what we have done with Army Sustainment Command in the LMI, we have web-based systems where we can see it, DA can see it, and the unit can see it. That's a huge step forward. We're globally linked, and that's the advantage of what we bring to the battlefield from AMC. And on the bottom right, we can also see where that equipment is being repaired. If it's a shortage, if it's causing a shortage, an EOH problem, and it's in a DOL, we can click on it. We can see if the DOL is on schedule. If it's not, we can theoretically move it if we have to a DOL that can make the schedule, or we can move it to a depot if, in fact, the work has gotten to the point where it needs to come to a depot. And we also see if the units for that piece of equipment that have excess. We can also see that on this screen, and then we can make some real-time decisions on excess, present the sourcing solutions to the ACOMs, and help them help themselves in redistributing equipment. This is how we're getting about building combat power for the Army. Next chart, please. As the CG said this morning, we ain't the same AMC we were 5 years ago. We have taken some bold and adaptive steps forward. The organizations on the left-hand side were all managed by separate organizations at the beginning of the war. Today, they're not. Today, they belong and are aligned under AMC because of our core competency in bringing logistics to the battlefield, and we do it very well. The directors of logistics are OPCON to us. We're moving forward to get them on our books at the end of this year. The Field Logistics Repair Centers, FLRCs, that once belonged to Forces Command that were bracked to AMC, basically we're taking those down. They competed with the DOLs. They caused the DOLs to be rather inefficient because they didn't get all the work on a post. And oh, by the way, the FLRCs were either off-post renting very costly facilities, or they were in old World War II facilities on post costing a fortune to keep up. So the last FLRC will take down at the end of this year, and that's a good thing. The work is going into the DOLs where it belongs, and helps them to get some efficiencies in terms of scale. So, and fleet management expanded. It's the TRADOC motor pool mission. We now own the maintenance for the TRADOC school equipment that's now on AMC's books. We've done that since we started the pilot in 2003, and is now officially in 12 an AMC mission. It has gone extremely well. We have been able to improve the aircraft readiness rates at Rucker by 30 points, from about 46% now to over 75%. While reducing the number of aircraft that they've had, because they've been able to turn their back aircraft because the readiness rates are so high they didn't need all the aircraft. And oh, by the way, the ground systems, we've been able to increase readiness by 15 points. In fact, turn back a battalion's worth of tanks at Knox because we just didn't need the extra tanks. So we turned that back into the Army so that we could redistribute it to units that needed it. So this is a good thing, globally linked. We can see inside each one of those organizations, and the synergy is just tremendous. Next, please. What we do in generating combat power stems from what DA tells us and what we can see in LIW and with the LMI mission, what the Army needs. That column where it says R3 rank, that's the driver. That is filled in by our folks at G8, soon to be filled in by us as the lead material integrator. But that's the number one, that's the driver, that's the items that are causing the biggest problems with equipment on hand. So the intent of this chart is to tell you and show you that we fix what the Army needs, we fix what we have to do to generate combat power for all of the units, just not BCTs. We're also looking at the generating force. We also look and make sure that TRADOC has got what they need and the other generating forces have what they need according to the priorities that the Army has set. We also take in what's on the water. As General Leonard hands it off to us, he puts it on a boat and it comes to us. We got to make sure that we're ready to induct all of the sources of repair, and we do that very well. And if I have an issue with a line coming to having a problem with assets, and that I got to get more assets, we go to SDDC, we go to the R2TF, that's led by General Vi, and we say, we need you to reprioritize some assets. I need to get this truck now instead of this forklift. Reprioritize what you're putting on the boats, and it works very well. We have not had a line stopper for an asset in AMC in the last 3 years. And it's because of what SDDC has done and what the R2TF brings by their position in theater. So it is a great tool for us. We know that we have to give General Leonard a little advance notice coming out of Afghanistan, but we know 6 to 8 to 10 months out if we're going to have a potential problem in the depots, because that's about what it's going to take to get it out of theater or to rearrange some priorities. Next chart. Just some gee-whiz numbers. We've changed the way we have done business in AMC. We know we have done a great job in what we've done in the past, over $2 million, but we know that we've got to concentrate on the folks still in the fight, and we've got equipment coming out of Afghanistan that we're going to have to program for and make sure that we've got the sources of repair ready to accept them, get them turned around, and get them in the hands of the soldiers. One last thing, and some of you may not know, is that the depots and our sources of repair are now expeditionary. We go to the equipment, we go to the installations, which is a good thing. We have fixed and repaired, we have 3 teams that go out to fix small arms, COML, Night Vision, and NBC. And they have been huge successes, repaired way over 1 million pieces of equipment at the post, because what it does is it enables the soldiers to go back to their families and not have to worry about fixing their equipment. We show up, we bring the parts, we bring the mechanics, and it has been a huge success. So it's all about generating combat power, and our industrial base has been very successful, and we intend to make sure that it remains successful in the future. And then I'll turn it over to my new friend, Mr. Raymer.
Thank you very much. I think I'm the only, in fact, I know I'm the only panelist up here who has spent his whole career in industry. So I feel humbled by being in the presence of all these general officers. Raytheon has over 80 years of innovation excellence in the DoD market, and I've spent probably half that time, approximately, myself in that market. And what I see is a huge transition, not the first one, but a big transition period we're going through from an industry perspective. We're coming off very high volume production, where the whole mantra was how fast, they need it in theater, how fast can we get it out, how quickly can we respond to needs for reset or refurbishment or even new capabilities. And I see us transitioning, as has been pointed out, to a period of how quick can we get this equipment back in country. I was in Baghdad in October, and it was just starting then. I'm amazed that all that stuff really got out of Iraq down south in the period that it did. So it's a transition period, and I think there are a lot of challenges we as industry face. As we come off production, we're going to have supply issues, we're going to have obsolescence issues we have to deal with. We have to plan ahead for that and be smart about how we deal with it. We know there are limited budget dollars. We know we don't have the luxury that we've had in the past. The budget will not allow procuring new equipment for new capabilities. We've got to live with what we have, for the most part, for years to come. And so we have to be very smart about how we not only keep the equipment operating and viable, but also insert technology and capability into the equipment as we go without wholesale replacement of it. The first chart there, you see 3 pictures. The one on the left is a Patriot. Thank you for that. We support for the Army an array of missiles, radars, and many combat systems throughout the world. The Patriot, for example, we fielded over 12,000 of those systems around the world. And those systems have been fielded since the early 1980s. Obviously, in order to keep those operational and keep them viable, a lot has been done in the way of retrograde and reset and technology refreshment. And there have been some real challenges along the way. In the early days of OEF, OIF, both, we found the environment played a big role. There was battle damage, which you always expect, but the environment, particularly the sand, was a big problem. Very harsh environment. And so there was a need to bring back a lot of these systems to address damage from the environment as well as battle damage. The only way we could do that was to establish a partnership with the critical depot infrastructure, to reset a number of the radar sets, the engagement control stations, the C2 elements, power plants, generators, you name it. So we had to do that and keep the equipment ready in theater as well. If you look at the center picture there, we're heavily involved in communications. And to refresh communications during the MRAP reset in Charleston, South Carolina, we took the opportunity to work with our industry partners and with the depot partners to use budget dollars efficiently and not only reset, but also insert improved capabilities in that equipment. And I think many of you will recognize a vehicle on the right there. That's very near and dear to our heart. We have a great deal of content there, and the fact is that those equipments came back regularly, most of them down to Red River, that particular platform, and so we had surges where we had to handle a very large number of equipments and turn them very quickly to make the R4Gen cycle on that. At that time, we had the luxury of having volume production going on, and so we had a hot line. We had a lot of spare parts in terms of inventory sitting there, so we were able to deal with that. So I think we have a challenge going forward as production lines come down, and some of them go out of production. Most of these systems will be winding down over the next year or two. So there's a challenge there, but there's also an opportunity, I think, to take advantage of our partnership with the depots and with AMC, and to look at ways we can at the same time we're upgrading and or at the same time we're refreshing, we can do upgrades to insert new capabilities. So as we upgraded some of these or addressed reset on some of these platforms, we also had the opportunity to to address life-limiting components, obsolescence, but also performance capabilities. For example, networking and going to new processing capabilities. So there are performance improvements that were incorporated across the fleet as well. A key here is commonality, and a lot of these systems that we built for the platforms are second generation EO. And there's a common B kit that goes across many platforms. As we go forward, that second gen technology is approaching 20 years of age. We're going to third generation. We've got to be very smart about how we implement that. We can't replace those sensors. We've got to find a way to upgrade to the next generation, hopefully without replacing the sensors wholesale. Next chart. So if you look at this chart, there are just some of our products there, but the one on the left, it represents the array of battlefield radar products that we have. And we build those systems down in Forest, Mississippi, and we had to ramp that factory up to a high level. At the same time, there were surge requirements that came in for depot support there, and the requirements began to outpace the U.S. Army logistics support resources. And so as a team, we had to address that issue. You know, how do we continue to build products, but at the same time turn around repairs and get the equipment back into theater? So there's a team of 48 government industry representatives put together, experts in production, parts, supply, repair and return, engineering, quality, supportability, that address the problem. And through that teamwork, we're able to increase the throughput for the TPQ 36 by almost 5x, and for the TPQ 37 by 2.5x. ITAS is in the center. That's the improved tow acquisition system. This system began fielding in June of 2000 as a part of the overall tow system upgrade or reset. And through partnership with our customer CCWS out of PEO Missiles in Space, we put together a program that provided cradle-to-grave support for that system from the time we shipped it and through its life cycle in theater and whatnot. And during the period, this system was heavily used in the first war as well as the second one. And there was a high demand. We had high volume production going. But through this cooperative effort, we achieved and maintained an average operational readiness of over 99%. We've consistently done that for the past 10 years plus. And so I think those are the kind of challenges we're going to have in the future is to, and at the same time we did that, we have addressed obsolescence, and we have continued to make capability insertions, looking at operational gaps. LRAS is the one on the far right there, and that's the long-range advanced scout surveillance system. Very capable, probably the best capability in the world in terms of EO/IR for surveillance. Heavily used in both conflicts. In Afghanistan, it's both a mounted and a dismounted system. Sensor can be pulled off a mount and taken to a remote combat combat post. The problem is it weighs 115 pounds. And I cannot imagine lugging one of those things up a mountain, but it happens. They helicopter some in. And so very capable, but there's a weight problem. Transitioning to third generation, if we do it smartly, can be done without replacement of those sensors. We can, if we design it right, we can simply upgrade those sensors. And when we do that, we see a 60% reduction in weight and a 50% reduction in volume. We also have incorporated or will incorporate networking, the ability to network sensors with weapons, the ability to fuse information from various sources. And I think going forward, we're going to have to find a way to make our inventory effectively nodes on a network. We're going to have to network going forward, and we have to find a way to do that without replacing equipment. So the bottom line is that I think going forward, we're going to be challenged. We're going to have supply issues. We're going to have obsolescence issues going forward as the overall procurement budget goes down. But we're going to have to team with AMC and TRADOC, and we're going to have to be very smart when we implement upgrades such that we do it once and we have that same capability such that it can transport across other sensors without impacting, or other platforms without impacting the size, weight, and power negatively. In fact, we can make money doing that. So commonality is I think a big part of the solution going forward. With that, I'll turn the mic over to General Urias.
Thank you, Glenn. Ladies and gentlemen, it's an honor for me to be part of this panel today, and I thank AUSA and General Bai for extending the invitation for me to participate. Well, unlike my colleague Glenn Raymer on the left from Raytheon and Ken Hunsinger from ITT on the right, Oshkosh specializes in tactical wheel vehicles. In short, Oshkosh does trucks. And we have been in the business for over 90 years, and 35 of those years we have spent in extensive vehicle recap and reset for the United States Army and actually for the Joint Force. If you think about it, regardless of the change in the defense strategy, we're still going to have a mobile Army. And so trucks are still going to be at the core of our Army. And so, regardless of the decline in the domestic budgets, we don't see the sky as falling. We just see that we've got to work smarter, just like you said, Glenn. We've got to work smarter, not harder. So, first slide, please. So let me spend a couple of minutes on this slide and talk about scalable sustainment to support the mission. When we consider the life cycle of a vehicle, there's a natural integration of product and technical expertise, lean processes, and sustainment. So during product development, as an original equipment manufacturer, or OEM, our operations, supply chain, and logistics engineering experts are key contributors to the design and test phases. And what that really means is we've got to balance technical requirements with the maintenance philosophy and sustainment requirements, and all of this has to end up with a vehicle that's affordable to the force for a long period of time, because we know that we're not going to be buying new. So as an OEM, we provide an intimate knowledge of the vehicles that we produce. And in that context, as you see by the triangle on the left there, we have to balance payload performance and protection. And very recently I had the privilege of sitting down at a luncheon with our Chief of Staff of the Army, General Odierno, who said that the pendulum has swung more toward the protection side, maybe to the detriment of mobility. And so we've got to really look at that, and we're taking that challenge on. He's given us a challenge in that regard. So if you think about the modifications that we as an OEM are performing, look, for example, at the M-ATV fleet in Afghanistan. We fielded those vehicles as part of the MRAP program, and we were still sustaining casualties to IED explosions. So very quickly, we got the requirement from the force, and within 7 weeks, we had designed and we were implementing on the vehicles that were forward deployed the underbody improvement kit, which is a adaptation to the M-ATVs and are saving lives today in combat. We use lean processes in all of our sustainment services to quickly and effectively return vehicles to operation. And that really means streamlining our processes, both in factory and in theater. In factory, we have really looked at the entire end-to-end process to make sure that every bit of our touch labor that can be automated is automated. Our parts process is refined to the point where we don't have shortages, which bogs down the line. And for the forward deployed force, as Jim Dwyer was talking about the depots being expeditionary, we have actually deployed our members of our workforce to the front, and we are participating in programs such as the Theater Provided Equipment Refurbishment, or TPER, program in Kuwait, where we're working on these vehicles, we're bringing them up, applying new technology, bringing them up when they sustain damage, and in that regard, really streamlining the entire process so that we get the vehicle back in the hands of the warfighter as quickly as possible. Additionally, we have been able to bring technology and automation into the picture. We had a very antiquated manual process. When a vehicle came into the reset or recap line, it took 38 hours from the time the vehicle entered the line until it was properly inspected, so that we would know exactly what needed to be applied to that vehicle in terms of technology upgrades or other applications. So we brought automation in, and we've been able to streamline that process from 38 to 17 hours. So that's a 50% improvement, and obviously time is money, time is that equipment not being in the hands of our troops, and so we're really focused in that area. And then, of course, with our infrastructure and expertise as an OEM, we've been very much involved, as I said earlier, in recap and reset programs to help save the Army money. Because obviously, if we can bring those vehicles back up to a serviceable condition with 0 miles, 0 hours, without having to buy new vehicles, then that's a good news story for the Army. So let me spend a couple of minutes on recap, retrograde, and tech upgrade. I don't mean to repeat what we know in general, but let me specify from an OEM perspective how we look at recap. We take battle-worn trucks and we upgrade them in factory to the latest configuration. And as I said, that means 0 miles, 0 hour, and a warranty. So currently we're taking, for instance, HEMETs. It's the Army's heavy logistics truck. And we've got A0s out in the fleet, and we've got A2s. So in the process, we're bringing them in and we're upgrading them to A3s and putting them back into the hands of our force. We're doing the same thing with the palletized loading systems. But in this particular case, you take a truck and you apply all the technology upgrades. And in this case, we have actually introduced a integrated armored cab for force protection. So if you think about, if you're a car enthusiast, this would be similar to a retro mod, where a chassis and a body from a 1950s car would be salvaged, key components would be upgraded, like the engine, power steering, and anti-lock brakes, and then you would return that vehicle to working condition, and it would be like a car of today. Reset, on the other hand, we take the same worn-out trucks, but we return them to working condition in the same configuration that we received them in. So no technology upgrades, no enhancements other than we just basically put them back to 1020 standards. So in this particular case, as I mentioned earlier, we had the facility in Kuwait, and that's what we were doing. You see it on the picture for Reset in the middle. We took the heavy trucks from Oshkosh and other OEMs that were brought in this facility, and we brought them back to 1020 standards. Technology upgrades, on the other hand, this is where we consistently apply some of our profit to research and development. And there we're looking at new designs, new opportunities to infuse technology such that we can increase the survivability or the performance of those vehicles that are in the hands of our troops. So in the case of that example that I mentioned earlier, we had the mission need in Afghanistan. We were still losing troops to IEDs, and that is where we brought this tech upgrade to fruition by developing the UIK, the Underbody Improvement Kit, and we're applying those today. And in that regard, we actually fielded 3,500 UIK kits in less than 7 months. So in this particular case, it would be like applying a towing kit to a personal vehicle. So you could tow a boat in Huntsville, right? So let me now transition to slide 2, my last slide. And I'll spend a few minutes on the family of heavy tactical wheeled vehicles, the FHTV, because by far this is the oldest fleet of the vehicles that exist in the Army's force today. So we're helping the Army maintain a technical edge across the wheeled vehicle fleets through recap, reset, and tech upgrades. In the case of the heavy fleet, this fleet was 20 years old. And so it was in very significant need of recap, reset, and technical upgrades. So through recap, we were able to revitalize the equipment and by bringing them back up to 1020 standards. As I said before, that's what we do with recap. In some cases, we were able to bring in new technology, and we made the old vehicle an old vehicle plus, because what we did is we put brighter headlights, a 4-point seat belt, it improved brake pads. We installed complicated systems like air ride suspension, crew protection systems, and more powerful, fuel-efficient engines. So obviously our troops are reaping the benefits of that effort, or those efforts, because they've got a higher performing vehicle and one that provides greater force protection. In many cases, we were required to conduct these upgrades in less than 100 days. And I will tell you, with a heavy vehicle, tearing it down and rebuilding it up is a tough process. So in this particular case, the average that we were able to attain in Kuwait was about 75 days. So again, we leaned forward because we knew what was at stake in terms of the impact to the warfighter. So as a result of the Army's strategic planning and investments, the average age of the tactical wheel vehicle fleet today is 7 years. And to me, that's unprecedented. It wasn't that way when I entered the Army in 1975. And it wasn't that way when I exited the Army in 2006. So a lot has happened just in the last 5 years, or 6 years, in terms of the Army's investment and really reaping the benefits of these tremendous programs. So let me spend a couple of moments on the Theater-Provided Equipment Refurbishment Program, the portion on the right. This was in response to an urgent requirement to repair the tactical vehicles that were basically in a very poor state of repair based on extreme conditions, battle damage, and we had a very short time frame to turn them from the before to the after. Many of the trucks that came through our facility in Kuwait had seen almost a decade of use in Afghanistan and Iraq. These included the HEMET, the HET, the Heavy Equipment Transporter, the PLS, as I said, trailers, and line haul. So we restored these vehicles to 1020 standards very, very quickly by being forward deployed, and the workforce just worked extremely well with all of the folks, the military folks and the DA civilians that were forward deployed, so that we could make sure we were synchronized in this entire operation. So what I want to portray here is that it's not just an OEM coming into country and working alone. We work very extensively with AMC, TACOM in particular, with DLA and with DCMA to maintain a multifaceted supply chain management approach. In this particular case, we pass through 60 to 65 vehicles through the Kuwait facility each month. And each vehicle, just to give you a frame, of reference, each vehicle required somewhere between 300 and 1,000 replacement parts individually. So that's a lot of touch labor. We also applied very strict lean processes. So I already alluded to the automation of the inspection process. The material flow process from start to finish to make sure we had the spare parts to apply to these vehicles on time so we didn't have any gaps. That was attended to very, very closely. On the shop floor, we did a plan, do, check, and act cycle for problem solving. And then, of course, we had performance-based metrics, which is such a strong part of the lean process, so that we were able to really look at our progress and refine that progress over time. So the results of the tipper program were we cut maintenance cycle time by at least 60 days compared to U.S. repaired type of facilities. We also avoided the transportation cost of bringing them back to the States and sending them back to the front. We delivered predictable solutions, and we controlled costs. And we were able to scale that process. Obviously, when we had fewer vehicles, we were able to scale down. But we had the expansion capability as well so that we could surge when we needed to. So in closing, let me just say that I know all of us here, whether you wear the uniform, whether you did wear the uniform, whether you're a DA civilian or you're in industry, we're all here to support our soldiers. There's no question about it. That's why we're here. And the challenge for us is to adjust our business models to support the new defense strategy so that we consistently maintain a healthy, capable, mission-ready tactical wheel vehicle fleet. That's my job. And that's essential to the warfighter. No matter what the strategy is, that's essential. So I think I speak for my colleagues in industry and all the others that are here, that we stand ready to do everything that's possible to support our warfighters in harm's way. And I look forward to your questions, and I'll turn the time over to my good friend Ken Hutziger.
Thanks, John. On behalf of all of us, it really is an honor to be here today with our uniform and industry partners. I am the president of Mission Systems, and we're a service organization. We provide service, support, logistics, maintenance, and repair all over the world. We have a strong presence in the Middle East, providing maintenance for the Army's pre-post stocks, as well as equipment recently retrograded out of Iraq. We have infrastructure support in Kuwait and Afghanistan, and communication support across the footprint. As I stated, it is an honor to be here to talk about maintenance, reset, and retrograde for our Army's future fighting capability, because we're involved in this process from the ground up. I know we're getting ready to go in the Q&A part of this panel today, and if I were to ask some questions, one of the questions I would ask is, what will we use as a construct in the Army to build down? You notice I didn't say draw down. And what I'm suggesting is that we have a holistic approach to resetting the force, and while material management, reset, and repair are, and what we're doing on the equipment coming out of Iraq and potentially Afghanistan is important, we have to do this across .mil-PF. I know there's a panel later in the week that's going to talk about how we procure and how we need to build and do things across .mil-PF, but as you build up and you build down, you got to use the same construct. And what I mean by that, it's a bigger picture. And when you're fixing the war-weary equipment, as we've learned in past TA processes, there's a personnel proficiency to it. There's a training and education component, and potentially a facilities upgrade component as well. In my mind, it's a real holistic approach, and we've got to apply the rigor to do it. My second question would be, is reset going to be enough upon the challenges of modernization, or do we need to do a recap that John was just talking about across our current fleet? And I would venture to say that we need to relook recap and a focus recap on our fleets and our equipment. We are an acquisition cycle away from basically having a new kit and things that we're going to have on the battlefield. And as an architect of the recap program we put together before 9/11, and what we did there, I think we need to, again, refocus and have a more holistic approach to what we want to do for recap. The time is now. My third question would be, and I had to ask this one as an ex-programmer, is will we be funded for reset? And I will tell you, it doesn't look good in the future. We all know about the defense headwinds. In 11, we obligated $140 million to APS, $2.9 billion to field level maintenance, and $4.6 billion to depot level maintenance. In 12, we've obligated about $164 million to APS, and that's up about $24 million, and that's a good thing. But for field level maintenance, we've only obligated $1.5 billion, and that's down $1.4 billion, or 48%. For depot level maintenance, we've allocated $2.6 billion, which is down $2 billion, or about 43%. So at the macro level, funding in 11 was at about $7.6 billion, and we're only funded at $4 billion now. So the challenge I say is, I know we can move funding in the year of execution, but how are we going to do the reset? How are we going to do what we need to do? So in summary, I read the Secretary of the Army's priorities last week, and POM 14 to 18 was number 2, and again, as a programmer, it warmed my heart. And number 5 was reset and modernization, and our leadership clearly gets it. And in a memorandum called Marching Orders, Army's Force of Decisive Action, issued in January, Chief of Staff of the Army, Ray Odierno, said, "The Army must be ready today and be prepared for tomorrow. We must prevent, shape, and win with the Army's 3 principal interconnected goals." And he's absolutely right. The cost of entering the fight without a dominant capability could cause unnecessary loss of lives. He says we must be ready to win, and this panel addresses the ready phase. Finally, as an industry partner, I'd like to tell you a couple things I've learned since leaving the military. When I was in the military, I used to think we were agile and capable of doing great change in short order. Since being in industry, I've come to the conclusion that we could be a lot more agile, and that it's industry that provides the services, the components with agility, ingenuity, and the ability to scope, surge, descope, and reduce capabilities. Industry partners allow combat commanders to focus on the fight, and we are first and foremost partners and force multipliers, and we have to be nested with our customers. Reversibility focuses on preparation, expansibility focuses on execution. As a deputy commander in Iraq, I was tasked with executing the withdrawal of forces from the country, and one of my first moves was to gather all the contractors in the country together and garner their support, which would only become a tremendous undertaking. And as a contract partner, I had the pleasure of watching the Army come out of Iraq and actually help service some of that equipment as it came out. General Vice started this discussion today talking about General Dunwoody's vision for the R2TF. And ma'am, I will tell you, your vision, your personal involvement, and what you did there was incredible, and thanks for doing it. I see Gus Perna here today, and we couldn't have done it without you. So thanks for your vision in doing that. Today, there are acres of equipment in various stages of reissue, reset, return to duty, and stuff that we're going to have to do maintenance and transportation on. A lot of it will be done by your partners here, and that's the contracting force. Rebuilding our Army is likely to be the most important thing our nation does in the next 10 years. And partnering with industry, providing responsible material management, framed in the tenets of .mil-PF, I think will result in a force structure that we can all go to the next fight with. I'd like to thank Doug and Dennis and our team here for having us today. And Doug, I think it's back over to you for questions.
Super. First question, and this is for General Vi and General Leonard, and even Mr. Dwyer. Utilization of reserve component. Critical in your mission set within theater. What do you anticipate the future of the reserve component utilization and structure looking like to be able to continue this capability at another war?
Well, I think your response, and we probably all three will shake our heads, that the reserve component was critical to successful mission and operation and will continue to do so. I think as the Army looks at our force structure and what we'll have to do in the future, we know exactly what those reductions will be, but I can tell you my experience there and continues today, the reserve component, critical component, being able to accomplish the mission, they bring a tremendous level of expertise to the mission and a lot of flexibility in their deployment. So I'm very, very proud to serve with a great part of the team. Captain?
Sir, I would just offer to that in our reserve component, at least with STDC, we also have some really interesting, unique, niche kinds of capabilities. I'm thinking about the rail battalion. We've got the only one left in this structure. But what most folks don't know We keep 5 soldiers deployed to Afghanistan working with US 4A and others on how Afghanistan might, in fact, build structure, rail, to move or other materials to market. It's a really important mission that the reserve component enables. We just don't have that capability in the active force, so that niche capability as well.
Sir, I'll just tell you from building combat power, we worry about the reserves just as we do the Compo 1. So we're with LMI and LIW, we're seeing what those folks need, and they have done a great job resetting themselves, and in some cases ask us for help, but the bottom line is they've always done it on time and done it very well.
Excuse me. Next question. Knowing that quality decisions are directly related to the quality of information provided, and you talked about that in many of your comments, how do you increase the quality of this information, your situational awareness, especially when you're talking about handling big data, early to have the greatest positive impact and maximize the Army's dollars?
Sir, I'll take a shot at starting this. Our friends at AUSA have done a great job in making the systems as easy to use as we can, and when we develop these STAMISs, I will tell you that Forces Command and all the ACOMs have realized that they got to get back to basics, and we've got to do a better job of supply accountability and really maintenance in the motor pools. And so we're working that. We're full of partners with the ACOMs and helping them to do that. We know that LMI and LIW is only as good as what the company commander's got on his hand receipt and how well he maintains it, or he or she maintains it. So we're trying to help that. I know the FORSCOM commander is, and all the ACOM commanders are putting some management into how we get back to basics, which is a good thing, which enables us to have better accountability for our items. We see the piles better that we can manage. And I know that logs and the Army Material Command are full of partners, and I know that we're working with General McHale, who's running that task force for the Chief of Staff, and how we can improve accountability, property accountability in the Army. And I think that between us and what we're doing with LOGSA and LMI and what General McHale is going to do, I think we're going to take a big step forward.
AMC is truly a purple organization. The other forces, the other components of our DoD structure constantly impact the ability of AMC to execute their mission and complement. What are such changes in force structure, for example, reduction in lift force structure, is going to have on your ability to execute your task?
We're up here debating on who's going to answer these questions. Well, clearly, if we look at this, the overall size of the Department of Defense force structures, you know, Army, Navy, let's just talk about the Army for a second. Our ability to lift gets directly at that point I was making about strategic velocity. So what's important is that we understand what the mission requirement is and what our capabilities are given a particular mission. Now, there's great goodness here as far as being purple and subordinate to Army Materiel Command. We have rapid port opening elements now, subordinate to us, whose sole mission is to go into a particular area of operations, establish a base, and then begin to pull the rest of the force in. So I think we're taking the right steps to posture us for a different future, if you will, that's not Iraqi freedom or enduring freedom, and not necessarily built into a patch or an R4Gen model. Said differently, we're trying to prepare for whatever contingency comes next. We practice all of those things jointly. We just did a JLOT, Joint Logistics Over the Shore, mission about 6 months ago in Morocco. So what we're trying to do is think about what's next and then posture ourselves accordingly by building smaller packages and force structure that are competent, capable of utilizing that lift that is available, notwithstanding that there will be an impact. You know, this ability to move massive forces is restricted. We'll also, frankly, continue to partner with industry, our commercial first practices allow us to expand our capability. If that helps answer that.
And I think also to align with our COCOMs, with our TSCs and ISCs, and how, as the CG talked about today, a globally networked command, to be able to focus on those combatant commanders and what the requirements are, and being able to provide forces to the Joint Force for those contingency missions and operations that come about.
Great. Yes, sir.
I will tell you that I don't think we're ever going to execute another operation where we're not joint coalition and purple. And AMC gets it. They've been able to adapt. They've been able to change to it. And all of us have. And that's just the nature of where we're going to go.
And this is, the next question may have a slightly different perspective from whether you're sitting on the right-hand side of the table or the left-hand side of the table. And it goes back to something General Dunwoody talked about earlier. Changing force structure, balance to 2020, and future requirements that are still being developed. What are your major concerns in making the right decisions in regard to reset and utilization of reset dollars today that reflect in the future? Sounds like a pretty good question.
Let me take a stab at it, and then
Okay.
if I missed it, then I'll turn it to General Leonard.
And
we
you'll turn it
spend,
over to General Vi, I got it.
We have spent a great deal of time studying the industrial base, both organic and the civilian sector. And we know that there, because of the downturn in workload, we know there are certain parts of the civilian sector that are at extreme risk. We are working with our friends at ASALT, working with our friends in industry, and we have made some decisions to make sure that on critical points of failure that we're keeping those lines open. We've in fact reduced some workload in our depots to send the work to industry to keep those lines working. So we have just had an industrial base summit with our ASALT partners and co-chaired by DAG4. So we studied that with all the PEOs, and we kind of know what sectors are really at critical risk right now, and we're trying our best, at least from the Army Materiel Command, to recognize that. And we make decisions, we don't make it in a vacuum, we make it synergistically so that we can keep those critical points of failure up and running and warm, so that we don't practice to be miserable and repeat what we've done in the past and take them down and stop. Hopefully that answers a little bit.
And from the commercial side, I mean, y'all mentioned this earlier in most of y'all's comments, remarks.
I would just add that from an industrial capacity standpoint, and it goes back to what you just said, Jim, demand. You know, volume is so critical, and we understand there's going to be a decrease in volume. The question is, how much? Because we can't sustain the workforce or the capacity if there's not a demand. And so we understand, and I'm sure you speak for my colleagues on the left and right, that new starts are going to be very rare. So it's incumbent upon us to look at what needs to be recapped, reset, and to bring in new technology where it applies. But that's what we're going to be doing in the future. And as long as we can balance it, and Jim, I'm really glad to hear what you just said, because that's the first time I've heard it, and it really, you know, that I'm going to take that back. We've got to be smart about this so that it's holistic. So I'll defer to.
I think you nailed it. I think that's exactly where we are.
And I'd say it's not only at the level we work, but we're really concerned about our supply base, because they're the first ones to start drying up, and that's the real challenge we have as we go. We're going to have to maintain this equipment for a long time to come.
We've got time for a couple more. Supply chain management, inventory levels, best value purchasing are all critical to the overall task of ensuring responsive and effective material management. Now, as the Army moves forward, how do you see this affecting reset and retrograde, and what tools are you looking for to help accomplish that task? It's really focused on supply chain management and decisions being made today that are going to be felt 2013, 2014, and 2015.
The Logistics Modernization Program, the LMP, which is the ERP system that we have adopted in AMC and have fully deployed, and it's now in a sustainment phase, is helping us to get after forecasting and understanding what demand looks like. Since the advent of the war, we have basically doubled our wholesale inventory in terms of Class 9 parts. We've got to be careful now on how we manage that because demand is going to fall off. We've got to make sure that we don't order items that are going to sit on the shelf and collect dust. That doesn't do us any good nor the taxpayers. So LMP is really, and we're learning how to ride that much better in AMC. We're learning how to ride that, and it really starts with the depots and the arsenals and our ammunition points in terms of their bill of materials and their routes through the factories and how we repair items, which then basically generates their requirements. So we've got to know what we're going to have to reset now and 2 or 3 years out, and we spend a lot of time ensuring that our suppliers, to include our friends at DLA, we spend a great deal of time talking to them, doing system-to-system transfers of data so that they understand what we are going to require in our depots and arsenals for repair parts, because they don't turn around, they can't beam the parts down there tomorrow. They have a lead time, we have a lead time, and we have done very well since the beginning of the war to get at how we forecast our parts. Is it 100% accurate? No, but we're getting better at it, and LMP really is helping us to see ourselves, and I am convinced that in a year or two, when we hook up the 2 ERPs, at least between AMC and DLA, that forecasting is going to get an order of magnitude better. Taxpayers' money gets spent much better. We order the parts that we are going to see and need in the factories, and it passes down to our industry partners because they provide a good portion of the parts, especially on the electronics side, that we've got to be able to tell them what kind of parts that we're going to need in the future, because some of these things, especially in aircraft, have lead times that exceed 2 years. So we've got to be very careful. It's a thin line that we've got to walk, but I think we're getting better at it.
Gentlemen, thank you. We now have some closing remarks that General Vai is going to express, and thank you for your service and for what you do for our soldiers.
Just like again to thank all the panel members, but I think as you heard the discussion today, just some takeaways as we leave. A lot of great questions, a lot of tremendous dialogue. First and foremost, staying focused on the current fight. As our Chief of Staff of the Army said, maintaining the best equipped Army in the world, that's what we're focused on day to day, even with the other challenges that we've discussed. Responsible retrograde and reset, we think those are enduring operations for our Army and AMC. And so we're working with CASCOM and TRADOC and how we can implement these processes into doctrine, but also how we can apply them to Afghanistan as we move forward. I think across the table has demonstrated the power of strategic relationships and how important they are, and even more so as we undergo operations in Afghanistan. We can't do it alone. It takes membership across the military, Department of Army civilians, with our contractors, with industry, with our allies to be able to accomplish the mission. Industry, clearly, our partners are critical for success. And you've seen that demonstrated here with our panel members here today and what they've demonstrated, what they bring to the fight. But also, just as you continue operations on day to day and as we reset our Army, those relationships that we have with industry and what we establish are going to be even more important, I think, as we reconstitute our Army. And last but not least, our soldiers made the difference. We talked about all of the capabilities that we all brought to the fight, but it's really those soldiers who moved over 11,000 loads, drove over 1.7 million miles, peaked at about 1,200 trucks per day in a 24-hour period, facing IEDs and all other types of threats, but they got it done. At the end of the day, they brought it across the line. They loaded on those ships. They delivered that for us. And so, again, just thank all of you again for attending today. Again, to all the panel members, thank you again for your contributions and your great support as well. And Doug, thank you for being a great moderator.
And one administrative remark, There will be a media roundtable interview with the panel members immediately following the panel, room 318 across the hall.
Thanks a lot, troops. Let me do one couple of things.